The binoculars were still swaying from the branch when Ranger Blake Anderson found them that September morning. Below them, two folding chairs sat empty, a thermos of coffee growing cold between them. Connor Davidson and Victoria Hayes, the bird-watching couple everyone knew, had been there moments before. Their journal lay open, Victoria's careful handwriting describing a rare warbler sighting, but the couple had vanished completely, leaving behind only their equipment in a mystery that would haunt the small mountain community for 14 years, until the truth hidden in plain sight finally came to light. Blake Anderson had been working as a park ranger at Millbrook Nature Preserve for 8 years when he made that discovery on September 15, 2009. The morning had started like countless others before it, with the familiar rhythm of early autumn settling over the 15,000-acre preserve. Blake had arrived at the ranger station before dawn, as was his habit, brewing his first cup of coffee while reviewing the day's scheduled activities and weather conditions. At 45 years old, Blake was a man who found comfort in routine and predictability, traits that had served him well during his previous career as a state trooper before he had chosen the quieter life of a park ranger. The Millbrook Nature Preserve was a jewel in the state park system, encompassing dense forests, pristine streams, and diverse wildlife habitats that attracted researchers, photographers, and nature enthusiasts from across the region. Blake had come to know every trail, every seasonal change, every regular visitor who frequented the park's hiking paths and observation areas. Among these regulars, none were more reliable or well-known than Connor Davidson and Victoria Hayes. Connor Davidson and Victoria Hayes were fixtures at Millbrook, as predictable as the sunrise and just as welcome. For over 25 years, they had arrived every Sunday morning at exactly 7:30 a.m., their burgundy Honda Civic appearing in the parking lot with clockwork precision. Blake had been observing their routine for nearly a decade, and it never varied by more than a few minutes. Connor at 68 was a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance. Despite being in his late 60s, he moved with confidence and purpose, his mind sharp and his passion for birdwatching undiminished by age. He was a recently retired electrical engineer who had spent 37 years working for the regional power company, designing and maintaining electrical systems with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to his nature observations. Victoria Hayes, 66, was Connor's perfect complement in every way. Where he was quiet and methodical, she was more animated and social, though no less dedicated to their shared passion. Her silver hair was always neatly styled, and she dressed practically but elegantly for their outdoor excursions, favoring earth-tone jackets and comfortable walking shoes. As a recently retired high school English teacher, she brought a literary sensibility to their birdwatching, often noting the poetic aspects of bird behavior and weaving compelling narratives around their observations. But here's what I need you to think about. What would make two experienced, careful people in their late 60s suddenly abandon everything they held dear and walk into danger? Hold that thought because the answer will shock you. They had met in college 46 years ago, married 43 years ago, and spent their entire adult lives building a partnership based on mutual respect, shared interests, and deep affection. Their recent retirement had been a joyful transition, not a reluctant surrender to age. At 68 and 66, they felt they were entering the most rewarding phase of their lives, finally free to pursue their passion for nature observation without the constraints of demanding careers. Their decision to move to the area 15 years earlier had been motivated primarily by their desire to be closer to Millbrook and other prime bird watching locations in the region. Connor's engineering pension and Victoria's teacher retirement benefits provided them with comfortable financial security, allowing them to focus entirely on their conservation activities and citizen science contributions. Their weekly routine was as precise as a carefully choreographed dance that had been perfected over decades of practice. Connor would emerge from the driver's seat first, moving with the steady confidence of a man who had maintained his physical fitness well into his late 60s. He would retrieve their matching folding chairs from the trunk, lightweight aluminum models with forest green canvas that they'd owned for over a decade. Victoria would gather their field equipment from the back seat with the organizational efficiency that had made her one of the most respected teachers in her former school district. 2 sets of binoculars, a leather-bound field notebook, several field guides, a thermos of coffee, in a small insulated bag containing their mid-morning snack of homemade cookies or seasonal fruit would be arranged with military precision. They would exchange quiet words, the comfortable conversation of a couple who had shared thousands of mornings together, then make their way along the well-maintained trail to their chosen observation spot. The location they had claimed as their own was about a quarter-mile up the main trail, positioned at a natural clearing where an ancient oak tree provided both shade and an excellent anchor point for hanging Connor's vintage Zeiss binoculars when not in use. From their chairs, positioned to face southeast toward the morning sun, they could observe multiple habitat zones simultaneously. The marshy area to their left attracted waterfowl and wading birds, while the meadow edges provided feeding grounds for numerous songbird species. The forest canopy above offered opportunities to spot raptors, woodpeckers, and other tree-dwelling species that might reveal themselves to patient observers. Blake had often stopped to chat with them during his morning patrols, and over the years had developed a genuine friendship with the couple. Connor would show him entries from their field notebooks, pointing out interesting behavioral observations or unusual sightings with the enthusiasm of a natural teacher. Victoria would update him on their participation in various citizen science projects, including the annual Christmas bird count and several migration monitoring programs that contributed valuable data to regional conservation efforts. Their dedication was remarkable for people of any age, but particularly impressive for a couple in their late 60s. In 25 years of Sunday morning birdwatching, they had missed fewer than a dozen sessions, and only due to severe weather conditions, illness, or family emergencies. They had documented over 300 bird species at Millbrook, contributed valuable data to multiple research projects, and created what many considered an invaluable long-term record of the preserve's changing avian populations. Now let me ask you something that might keep you awake tonight. Have you ever noticed something suspicious in your neighborhood, but convinced yourself you were just imagining things? Connor and Victoria made a different choice, and it cost them everything. The couple's field notebooks were works of art in themselves, representing thousands of hours of careful observation and meticulous documentation. Victoria's elegant handwriting filled page after page with precise observations, detailed behavioral notes, and carefully rendered sketches that would have impressed professional ornithologists. Each entry included exact timestamps, weather conditions, and GPS coordinates recorded with Connor's engineering precision. Connor contributed technical observations about bird flight patterns, feeding behaviors, and seasonal variations that reflected his analytical background and scientific training. Together, they had created what Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the State University ornithologist who worked with them, called one of the most comprehensive long-term data sets on local bird populations in the entire region. Their contributions extended beyond simple data collection. Connor had used his engineering skills to design and build several innovative bird feeding stations and observation blinds that had been adopted throughout the state park system. Victoria had written detailed species accounts and behavioral descriptions that had been published in regional birding publications and used in educational programs. At 68 and 66 respectively, they were living proof that retirement could be a time of increased productivity and meaningful contribution rather than gradual withdrawal from active engagement with the world. Their energy levels, intellectual curiosity, and physical capabilities would have impressed people half their age. On that particular September morning, Blake had completed his usual pre-dawn preparation routine at the ranger station. He reviewed the weather forecast, partly cloudy, temperature rising from 45 to 68 degrees, light winds from the northwest. Perfect conditions for bird watching, he noted, the kind of morning that would bring Connor and Victoria particular joy and potentially reward their patients with exceptional sightings. The preserve was especially beautiful that morning, showcasing the subtle transformation that marked the beginning of autumn in the Pacific Northwest. Early September had begun painting the landscape with delicate touches of gold and crimson that seemed to glow in the slanted morning light. The air carried that crystalline clarity that comes with the first cool nights of the season, and dewdrops on spiderwebs created thousands of tiny prisms that scattered rainbow fragments across the forest floor. Blake began his trail inspection at 7:45, following his standard route that would take him past the major trail junctions, picnic areas, and popular observation points. As he walked, he automatically noted anything that might need attention. Fallen branches that could block paths, erosion issues that might require repair, damaged signs that needed replacement, or litter left by inconsiderate visitors. The preserve was his responsibility, and he took that stewardship seriously, understanding that his diligence helped preserve the pristine environment that visitors like Connor and Victoria cherished. When he reached the main trail overlook at approximately 8:15, Blake could see Connor and Victoria in the distance, already settled in their chairs near the oak tree that had become their unofficial headquarters. Even from several hundred yards away, their familiar silhouettes were immediately recognizable. Connor sat upright in his characteristic posture, binoculars raised to his eyes as he tracked something in the canopy above. Victoria leaned forward slightly, writing in their field notebook with the focused concentration he had observed countless times before. Everything appeared perfectly normal, following the pattern Blake had observed hundreds of times over the years. The scene radiated the peaceful contentment that had made Connor and Victoria such beloved figures among park staff and regular visitors. They embodied the best aspects of the preserve's mission: patient observation, respectful engagement with nature, and dedication to understanding and protecting the natural world. Blake continued his rounds, checking the condition of trail markers, emptying trash receptacles strategically placed to encourage proper waste disposal, and making notes about areas that would need maintenance attention during the coming week. The preserve's trail system covered over 30 miles of carefully maintained paths, and Blake took considerable pride in keeping every route well-marked and accessible to visitors of all ages and physical capabilities. After completing his initial circuit, Blake returned to the ranger station to update his daily log, respond to radio communications from other park units, and review any special events or concerns scheduled for the day. It was a quiet Sunday morning with no organized group activities, guided tours, or maintenance operations planned. The preserve would host only the usual Sunday visitors, hikers, photographers, families, and nature enthusiasts seeking peaceful communion with the natural world. Think about this for a moment. What if the people you trusted most, the ones who were supposed to protect you, were actually the ones putting you in danger? That's exactly what Connor and Victoria were about to discover. At 9:15, Blake decided to make a second patrol loop, partly for thoroughness and partly because the morning was so beautiful, he wanted to spend more time outdoors enjoying the perfect weather conditions. This route would take him directly past Connor and Victoria's observation point, and he looked forward to checking in with them and perhaps learning about any interesting sightings they had recorded during their first hour of observation. As he approached the oak tree clearing, Blake experienced one of those moments when something feels fundamentally wrong before the conscious mind can identify the specific problem. The scene looked normal at first glance. Two chairs positioned facing the meadow with their typical precision, equipment arranged with the meticulous organization he associated with Connor and Victoria, the familiar oak tree casting its spreading shade across the small clearing. But there was an absence, a stillness, that struck him as fundamentally different from what he expected to find. The chairs were empty, not just temporarily vacant, as if their occupants had stepped away briefly to get a closer look at an interesting bird or to stretch their legs, but definitively abandoned with a finality that made Blake's stomach clench with sudden concern. He called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still morning air that seemed almost unnaturally quiet. "Connor! Victoria!" The only responses came from the natural sounds of the forest, a cardinal's sharp whistle somewhere in the canopy above, the distant splash of a beaver working in the marsh, the rustle of small creatures moving through the undergrowth. The absence of human voices in response to his calls sent a chill down Blake's spine. Blake approached the chairs with growing alarm, his law enforcement training automatically engaging as he processed the scene before him. What he found was both mundane and deeply disturbing, ordinary in its details but extraordinary in its implications. Victoria's field journal lay open on the small folding table positioned between the chairs. Her favorite pen, a silver Parker fountain pen that Connor had given her for their 20th wedding anniversary, abandoned mid-sentence beside it. Connor's thermos, a high-quality stainless steel model they'd used for years, sat beside the journal with two ceramic cups partially filled with coffee. Blake touched the thermos cautiously and found it still warm, the coffee in the cups barely lukewarm, but not yet cold. Whatever had drawn Connor and Victoria away from their chairs had happened very recently, probably within the past 30 to 40 minutes. The binoculars told their own part of the story with heartbreaking clarity. Connor's vintage Zeiss glasses, which he'd owned for over 30 years and treated with the reverence of precious heirlooms, hung from their usual branch on the oak tree. The leather strap showed wear from decades of careful use, and Blake knew Connor would never have left them hanging there if he planned to be away for more than a few minutes. Victoria's smaller, more modern binoculars were missing from their usual place on the table, suggesting she had been using them when whatever happened occurred. But here's what haunts me most about this case. Victoria was in the middle of writing when she stopped. Her pen was uncapped, ink was still on the page, and her sentence was incomplete. What could have been urgent enough to make a meticulous person like Victoria abandon her documentation mid-word? Blake examined Victoria's journal entry with the careful attention his police training had taught him to apply to potential evidence. The morning's observations were recorded with the typical precision he had come to expect from the couple over years of casual conversations about their findings. The page was filled with her neat cursive handwriting, documenting arrival time, initial weather observations, and the first bird sightings of the morning with scientific accuracy. The entries began normally, following the format Connor and Victoria had perfected over decades of practice. 7:32 a.m. Arrived to partly cloudy conditions, light northwest breeze, temperature approximately 48 degrees. Visibility excellent, humidity low. Red-winged blackbirds active in marsh area, at least 6 individuals observed. Connor noted male displaying territorial behavior toward perceived intruders. The observations continued chronologically with the methodical precision that had made their work valuable to professional researchers. 7:45 a.m. Pair of blue jays in parking area, possibly investigating dropped food items from yesterday's visitors. Behavior suggests human food conditioning. 8:12 a.m. Wood thrush heard calling from dense undergrowth near creek, unable to obtain visual confirmation due to vegetation density. Call patterns suggest territorial establishment. 8:23 a.m. Possible wood warbler in high canopy, observation inconclusive due to backlight conditions and distance. Connor attempting photographic documentation. The observations showed no sign of concern or alarm. Connor and Victoria had been enjoying a typical morning of productive bird watching, documenting species and behaviors with their usual thoroughness and enthusiasm. Nothing in their earlier entries suggested they were aware of any danger or unusual circumstances that might threaten their safety. The final entry, the one that would haunt investigators and family members for years to come, was abruptly interrupted in a way that suggested sudden, unexpected urgency. 8:47 a.m., yellow warbler confirmed, male, feeding behavior observed in willows near creek. Excellent opportunity for behavioral documentation and photography. Connor successfully photographed feeding sequence. 9:05 a.m. Unusual metallic sound from ravine area, unlike any natural sound or normal park maintenance activity. Sound consistent with machinery operation where none should occur. Connor believes may indicate unauthorized human activity in protected area. Have decided to investigate source of sound. Going to check. The sentence ended there, Victoria's silver pen abandoned, as if she had been suddenly interrupted by something that demanded immediate attention. The ink was still slightly wet, indicating that whatever had drawn them away had happened within minutes of Blake's arrival at the scene. Here's what I want you to consider. Connor and Victoria had been coming to this spot for 25 years. They knew every sound, every normal activity, every legitimate reason someone might be in the area. When they heard something that didn't belong, they knew it was significant. But what they found would cost them their lives. Blake felt his pulse quicken as he processed the implications of Victoria's final entry. The ravine she referenced was about 200 yards from their current location, accessible only by a narrow, challenging trail that branched off from the main path about 50 yards further along the route Blake had just traveled. The trail was unmarked and rarely used, suitable only for experienced hikers comfortable with steep terrain and potential hazards. Blake immediately radioed his supervisor, Captain Marcus Webb, using the emergency frequency to report the situation and request immediate backup. His voice was steady but urgent as he described finding the abandoned campsite and the concerning circumstances surrounding the couple's apparent sudden departure from their normal routine. While waiting for assistance, Blake conducted a preliminary search of the immediate area, calling Connor and Victoria's names at regular intervals and carefully examining the ground around their chairs for any signs of disturbance, struggle, or hasty departure. His law enforcement background had taught him to preserve potential crime scenes while gathering as much information as possible. The earth around the chairs showed only normal signs of use that was consistent with Connor and Victoria's regular presence at this location. There were slight depressions where the chair legs had rested week after week, a few scattered leaves that might have fallen naturally or from their movements, and the faint impressions of their footprints in a small patch of soft earth near the trail junction. Nothing suggested violence, panic, or any kind of physical altercation. Connor's lightweight windbreaker hung neatly on the back of his chair, and Blake could see the outline of his car keys in the front pocket alongside what appeared to be a small notebook and reading glasses. Victoria's practical leather purse sat beside her chair, a well-worn bag she carried on all their outings. Blake didn't disturb these items, understanding their potential value as evidence, but their presence reinforced his growing conviction that whatever had happened here had not been planned or anticipated by Connor and Victoria. The couple's Honda Civic remained in its usual parking spot, locked and undisturbed. Blake checked the vehicle from a distance, noting that nothing appeared to have been removed or disturbed. The car's presence eliminated the possibility that Connor and Victoria had simply decided to cut short their birdwatching session and return home for some unknown reason. Captain Marcus Webb arrived within 25 minutes, accompanied by Deputy Sheriff Tyler West from the County Sheriff's Department and emergency medical technician Patricia Brown from the local volunteer rescue squad. Webb was 54 years old and had been managing Millbrook Nature Preserve for 12 years. He was a stocky man with graying hair and a professional demeanor that had earned him respect from both his staff and the public he served. He had known Connor and Victoria almost as long as Blake had, and his concern was immediately evident as he examined the abandoned campsite. "This isn't like them at all," Webb said, echoing what everyone who knew the couple was thinking. "In all the years I've known Connor and Victoria, they've never deviated from their routine without excellent reason. They don't take unnecessary risks. They don't wander off established trails without proper preparation, and they certainly don't leave their equipment unattended. Something significant has happened here. Something that convinced them to abandon everything they normally hold sacred." Now, I need to ask you something that might change how you think about this entire case. What if the person everyone trusted to solve this mystery was actually the one responsible for creating it? What if the very man tasked with finding Connor and Victoria was the one who knew exactly where they were? Deputy West, a methodical investigator in his early 40s with extensive experience in missing persons cases, began documenting the scene with digital photography and detailed written notes. He photographed the chairs, the abandoned equipment, the journal entry, and the surrounding area from multiple angles, understanding that these images might become crucial evidence if the case developed into something more serious than a simple missing persons report. Webb and Blake discussed the couple's established habits, their health status, their family situation, and possible explanations for their sudden absence from the observation point. Both men knew Connor and Victoria well enough to understand that their behavior was completely out of character and suggested that something genuinely alarming had occurred. The metallic sound Victoria had noted in her final journal entry became the immediate focus of their concern and speculation. If Connor had convinced Victoria to investigate something unusual, it would have had to be something that genuinely captured his attention and overcame his natural caution about exposing Victoria to potential risks. If Connor suggested leaving their chairs to investigate strange sounds, Blake explained to the growing group of searchers, it would have been because he thought it was genuinely important to the preserve's welfare. He's incredibly curious about anything that might affect the wildlife or the integrity of the park, but he's also extremely protective of Victoria. He wouldn't have suggested leaving their secure position unless he believed the potential discovery was worth the risk. The trail to the ravine was overgrown and challenging, definitely not suitable for people of Connor and Victoria's age under normal circumstances. It descended steeply through dense undergrowth, crossed a narrow stream on slippery rocks, and required navigating around several fallen trees and unstable slopes. But if they had heard machinery or vehicles operating where none should be, a possibility that seemed increasingly likely given Victoria's description of metallic sounds unlike normal park activity, Connor's engineering background and strong sense of civic responsibility might have motivated him to investigate despite the physical challenges. Within 2 hours of Blake's initial discovery, a comprehensive search operation was underway. Local volunteer firefighters joined park staff and county sheriff's deputies in systematically combing the area around the ravine and the connecting trail system. The terrain presented significant challenges, with dense undergrowth that limited visibility, multiple stream crossings that could be treacherous for elderly hikers, and steep slopes that would quickly exhaust anyone not accustomed to difficult hiking. Here's something that should make you question everything you think you know about this case. The search teams were being directed by the very person who had the most to lose if Connor and Victoria were found alive. But nobody suspected that yet. The search teams worked in carefully coordinated groups, maintaining constant radio contact and following predetermined search patterns designed to cover every accessible area within a reasonable radius of the couple's last known position. Bloodhounds were brought in from the state police K-9 unit, following scent trails that led them to various points along the main trail system, but seemed to dissipate completely at the junction where the path to the ravine branched off from the main route. The dogs' behavior was puzzling to their handlers. They could track Connor and Victoria's scents clearly along the main trail, following the route the couple had taken hundreds of times over the years. But at the junction where Victoria's journal suggested they had turned toward the ravine, the scent trail seemed to vanish as if it had been deliberately obscured or eliminated. As the search expanded and more personnel arrived from neighboring counties, additional details about Connor and Victoria's lives and recent activities began to emerge through interviews with family members, friends, and fellow birdwatchers. Their daughter, Patricia Brown, received the phone call that every adult child dreads: notification that her parents were missing under mysterious and potentially dangerous circumstances. Patricia immediately drove up from Portland, arriving at the preserve that evening with her face drawn with worry and barely contained panic. At 61, she was a successful attorney who had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's methodical approach to problem solving. She was also deeply devoted to her parents and had maintained close, regular contact with them throughout their retirement years. Patricia provided investigators with crucial background information about her parents' routines, health status, state of mind, and recent activities that helped paint a comprehensive picture of their lives and possible motivations. She emphasized their excellent physical condition for people in their late 60s, their careful approach to outdoor activities, and their strong commitment to each other's safety and well-being. "They called me yesterday evening," Patricia told Detective Ryan Mitchell, who had been assigned to lead the investigation. "They were excited about this morning's bird-watching session because Mom mentioned that someone at the Wednesday Audubon Society meeting had reported unusual bird activity in the preserve, possibly early migrants, or a rare species sighting. They were hoping to document something special, maybe even historically significant for the region's bird records." This information added another crucial dimension to the mystery. If Connor and Victoria had been specifically hoping to observe unusual bird activity, they might have been more willing than usual to investigate sounds or movements that caught their attention. The metallic sound Victoria described in her journal could have seemed like an opportunity for discovery rather than a warning signal to be cautious. Detective Mitchell was a methodical investigator with 16 years of experience in missing persons cases, including several high-profile disappearances in wilderness areas throughout the Pacific Northwest. He understood that the first 48 hours were crucial in any missing persons investigation, but Connor and Victoria's case presented unique challenges that set it apart from typical missing hiker scenarios. Let me pause here and ask you to think about something disturbing. What if Connor and Victoria weren't the first people to discover something they shouldn't have seen? What if there had been others who had simply never been reported as missing? There were no obvious signs of foul play at the scene, no evidence of medical emergency or sudden illness, no indication of intentional departure or family conflict. Two people with decades of experience in outdoor activities had simply vanished from a familiar, well-traveled location during broad daylight, leaving behind all their personal belongings and creating a mystery that defied conventional explanation. The search operation continued through the night, with powerful portable floodlights illuminating the ravine area and thermal imaging cameras scanning the forest canopy for heat signatures that might indicate the presence of human bodies, either living or deceased. The technology available in 2009 was sophisticated but not infallible, particularly in dense forest and environments where thick tree cover could obscure thermal signatures and rocky terrain could interfere with other detection methods. By the second model, the search had expanded to include neighboring state forest lands and private property within a 5-mile radius of the preserve. Helicopters conducted systematic aerial reconnaissance while ground teams continued their methodical coverage of every accessible trail, creek bed, ravine, and hidden grove where two people might have sought shelter or fallen victim to accident or misfortune. The story began attracting regional media attention, with local television stations and newspapers reporting on the mysterious disappearance of the devoted birdwatching couple who had become beloved figures in the local conservation community. The unusual circumstances of their disappearance, the abandoned equipment, the incomplete journal entry, the complete absence of any logical explanation, captured public imagination and generated numerous tips and theories from concerned citizens. Connor and Victoria's extensive collection of field notebooks became a crucial focus of the investigation, representing a potential treasure trove of information about their activities, concerns, impossible encounters with dangerous situations. Detective Mitchell assigned 2 experienced officers to review these records systematically, looking for any patterns, concerns, or unusual observations that might provide clues to the couple's disappearance or suggest potential threats they might have encountered. What emerged from this painstaking analysis was both illuminating and deeply disturbing. Beginning around 2007, approximately 2 years before their disappearance, Connor and Victoria's journals began including increasingly frequent references to unusual activities and unexplained sounds in remote areas of the preserve. These observations were noted with the same careful attention to detail they brought to their birdwatching, including specific dates, times, locations, and detailed descriptions of what they had seen or heard. The pattern was unmistakable and increasingly alarming. The couple had been systematically documenting sounds of machinery operating in areas where no official maintenance was scheduled, vehicle tracks on logging roads that were supposedly permanently closed to all traffic, and occasional evidence of human presence in locations that should have been pristine wilderness accessible only to wildlife and the most dedicated hikers. Here's what makes this even more chilling. Connor and Victoria weren't just observing these suspicious activities. They were documenting them with scientific precision, creating a detailed record that could serve as evidence in court. They had no idea they were signing their own death warrant. Well, more significantly, Connor and Victoria had not kept these observations to themselves or dismissed them as unimportant anomalies. Several journal entries included references to conversations with park management about their concerns, and Detective Mitchell discovered that they had contacted Captain Webb directly on at least 3 occasions over the past 2 years to report suspicious activities they had observed during their weekly birdwatching sessions. The couple's reports to Webb had been detailed and specific, including exact locations, dates, times, and descriptions of the suspicious activities they had witnessed. They had approached these reports with the same methodical precision they brought to their bird observations, understanding the potential importance of accurate documentation for any subsequent investigation. Webb acknowledged that Connor and Victoria had brought their concerns to his attention multiple times, but insisted that each report had been thoroughly investigated and found to be explainable by normal park operations, authorized maintenance activities, or misidentified natural phenomena. However, his explanations seemed increasingly unconvincing as the investigation revealed significant discrepancies between his official accounts and the couple's detailed documentation. A thorough examination of preserved maintenance records revealed patterns that strongly supported Connor and Victoria's observations rather than Webb's dismissive explanations. Equipment and personnel were being deployed to remote areas not covered by any official work orders or authorized activities. Fuel consumption for park vehicles significantly exceeded what legitimate operations would require, suggesting extensive unauthorized use. Most significantly, several of the specific locations Connor and Victoria had flagged in their journals showed absolutely no authorized maintenance activity during the precise dates and times they reported hearing machinery or observing human activity. Detective Mitchell's suspicions about Webb intensified dramatically when a comprehensive financial background check revealed that the captain was living well beyond what his Park Service salary could reasonably support. Bank records showed large, regular cash deposits that Webb couldn't adequately explain when questioned directly. Phone records revealed extensive contact with individuals who had documented criminal backgrounds related to drug trafficking, money laundering, and other serious illegal activities. The investigation took a dramatic turn when one of Webb's criminal associates, arrested on unrelated charges in a neighboring county, provided information about illegal drug manufacturing operations that had been using remote areas of state forest lands as hidden production facilities. The informant specifically mentioned Millbrook Nature Preserve as a location where such operations had been conducted with the knowledge and active protection of corrupt park officials. Think about the irony here. Connor and Victoria spent their retirement years carefully documenting the natural world they loved, never realizing they were also documenting evidence of the corruption that would ultimately kill them. Confronted with this mounting evidence, Webb initially maintained his innocence and continued to insist that Connor and Victoria's reports had been properly investigated and found to be completely unfounded. However, when presented with financial records, phone logs, testimony from his criminal associates, and the overwhelming pattern of discrepancies between his explanations and documented facts, Webb's denials became increasingly desperate and unconvincing. After 18 hours of sustained interrogation, Webb finally broke down and confessed to his role in facilitating illegal drug operations within the preserve. For over 3 years, he had been accepting substantial payments in exchange for providing access to remote areas of the park and ensuring that drug manufacturing operations could proceed without interference from law enforcement or detection by park visitors. The confession revealed the tragic truth about Connor and Victoria's disappearance. On the morning of September 15, 2009, the couple had finally gotten close enough to one of the hidden drug operations to observe activities that would have exposed the entire criminal enterprise. They had seen equipment, vehicles, and personnel that clearly indicated illegal activity, and their reputation for meticulous documentation and civic responsibility meant they would certainly report what they had witnessed. Webb's partners in the criminal operation had panicked when they realized they had been discovered by witnesses who could not only identify them, but also provide detailed, scientifically precise testimony about their activities. The decision to eliminate Connor and Victoria had been made quickly, motivated by the desperate need to protect an operation that was generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in illegal profits. Webb led investigators to a burial site deep in the state forest, approximately 6 miles from where Connor and Victoria's chairs had been found. The location had been carefully chosen to be virtually impossible to discover accidentally, hidden in a remote ravine accessible only by unmarked trails through extremely difficult terrain that would challenge even experienced hikers. Connor Davidson and Victoria Hayes had been shot and buried together, their deaths occurring within hours of their disappearance from the observation point near the oak tree. Webb claimed the murders had been motivated by panic rather than premeditated malice, but the careful concealment of the burial site and the methodical cleanup of the crime scene suggested otherwise. The criminal operation Webb had been protecting was extensive and sophisticated, involving a network of individuals who used the preserve's most remote areas to manufacture methamphetamine and other illegal drugs. The pristine location provided perfect cover for their activities, while the isolated logging roads allowed transportation of supplies and finished product without detection by law enforcement or observation by legitimate park visitors. Webb's position as preserve captain had given him the ability to monitor law enforcement activities, control access to sensitive areas, and ensure that the criminal operation remained completely undetected. He had essentially turned the preserve into a private criminal enterprise while maintaining the facade of environmental protection and public service. Several arrests followed Webb's confession, ultimately dismantling a drug network that had operated within the preserve for nearly 4 years and generated millions of dollars in illegal profits. The criminal organization had corrupted not only Webb, but also several other park officials, local law enforcement officers, and government contractors who had facilitated the operation in various ways. The environmental damage was extensive and heartbreaking, requiring months of specialized cleanup to remove contaminated soil, illegal chemical dumps, and improvised structures that had been hidden throughout the most pristine and sensitive areas of the park. The cost of restoration exceeded $2 million dollars and took over a year to complete. For Patricia Brown, the resolution of her parents' case brought both closure and renewed grief that would take years to process fully. Connor and Victoria had died because of their dedication to careful observation, their sense of civic responsibility, and their unwillingness to ignore evidence of wrongdoing. Their meticulous documentation of suspicious activities had ultimately led to justice and the dismantling of a significant criminal operation, but at the cost of their own lives. The Millbrook Nature Preserve underwent significant changes following the revelation of corruption and criminal activity within its management structure. Blake Anderson was promoted to captain, replacing Webb, and implemented comprehensive new security procedures and citizen reporting systems designed to prevent future criminal exploitation of the preserve's remote areas. Let me ask you one final question. How many other Connor and Victoria stories are out there? How many careful observers have noticed things they shouldn't have seen in places where powerful people have secrets to protect? A memorial trail was established in Connor and Victoria's honor, featuring interpretive signs that highlighted their contributions to bird conservation and citizen science. The trail winds through some of their favorite observation areas and includes stations where visitors can learn about bird identification, behavior, and conservation. Their decades of field observations were compiled and published as a comprehensive scientific resource, ensuring that their work would continue to benefit wildlife research and conservation efforts for generations to come. The empty chairs were preserved and eventually moved to a place of honor at the preserve's visitor center, where they serve as a permanent memorial to two people who loved the natural world so deeply they died trying to protect it. Connor's vintage binoculars still hang from the oak tree where Blake Anderson found them 14 years ago, a lasting reminder that the most careful observers often discover truths that others desperately want to keep hidden. Their story serves as both an inspiration and a warning that ordinary citizens who pay attention to their surroundings can make extraordinary contributions to justice and environmental protection, but that such vigilance sometimes comes with unexpected and tragic consequences. If this story of corruption, betrayal, and ultimate justice has kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into true crime cases that prove reality is often stranger and more disturbing than fiction. Leave a comment below telling us what you think really motivated Webb's criminal partners to make such a desperate decision. And share this video with anyone who appreciates stories of ordinary people who refuse to look away when they witnessed injustice.